everybody, and welcome back to Dark Moon Dice. Today I am going to be showing you how I have hacked my Wish or AliExpress molds that lots of people have got, and what I've done so that you are pulling out kind of near perfect dice every time. So this is kind of an example set of what I've made. These haven't been sanded or polished yet, but I'll show you what I did to get something really good quality coming straight out of the molds. I know a lot of people have purchased these and there are some kind of issues along with them. So what I thought I would do is I would show you how I've fixed mine up in order to make really high quality dice straight out of the molds with a lot less cleanup, a lot less bubbles, and a lot less pain in the ass, really. So what I've basically done is I have created a funnel using a pipette. This is a 5mm pipette. I got these on Amazon. And I've used it to make a reusable reservoir. And I'm going to show you how I did that and how I put the dice together. The reservoir is going to make sure that you're not getting any of those kind of concave bubbles at the top where your resin starts to sink. All of my normal molds, like you see here, have this reservoir at the top, which I fill with extra resin so that when it's curing and the resin shrinks down inside, there's extra resin in the top to kind of fill in, and that's why we don't have bubbles at the top of our dice. So in order to fix this and also to make something kind of reusable and kinder to the planet, I have used the top. So I've cut off, and I'm going to show you, I've cut off the top of the pipette to use as a reservoir. I've cut it down the side, and then I've used a piece of tape to secure it, which means once we pull these out when they've been cured, we can open up the pipette, we can pull out the resin that's stuck in there, and we can use it again. Now, the only thing you have to remember here is that all of the different molds have different hole sizes. Now, specifically here, you can see on the D12 how large the hole is. So you're going to need to cut your pipette pretty much for each hole. What's the radius, diameter. Oh man, math is hard. Okay. But that's okay. You just kind of start small and then we're going to keep snipping away. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take off the top of my pipette because this is the only part that we're going to be working with for now. And then I'm going to snip off the really tiny end because that's obviously way too small to fit into this hole, and that's not what we want. We want something that's snug enough to fit into there securely, but without it dipping down into the dice. So that's one thing that we really want to make sure that we're avoiding. So I'm going to, like I said, I kind of just slide it in. That will give you a relatively kind of accurate measurement where you want to try and snip off there. And then we can kind of just snip off little bits at a time. Again, start small. We can always snip off more if we need to. So let's see if that's going to fit the hole perfectly. Now again, we do not want that. See how it's hanging off the inside? That is going to go into your dice, which means we've gone way too far. So we need to shorten this even more. You do not want any part of that pipette sticking into the dice. So we want this completely flush with the outside. Thankfully, these do have enough thickness. You can see there, you could probably, easily have your pipette sitting in, but not coming out the other side. I'm sorry if that's a really complicated explanation, but hopefully once you see it, it'll make a lot more sense. Okay, so there we go. So you can see that's staying nicely in there, not a problem, and it is not coming out the back end. We do not want it coming out the back end, or that's going to end up putting a divot into our dice. So perfect. So once we have our hole cut, then what we're going to do is we're going to just cut down one side, the length of it. Easy peasy, nothing to it. And this is what's going to make them reusable. So when they come out, and this is going to be filled with the extra resin from that reservoir for when your, the resin in your dice shrinks, we're going to be able to open this up. We're going to be able to pick the resin out, and then we can reuse this. Because we are using a single pipette for each one of these. I mean, not that they're very expensive, but it's also about being kind to the planet as well. So in order to secure this, I'm just going to use, as always, a small piece of tape just over the cut. Again, it doesn't have to go all the way up to the top. We just want to make sure that the extra resin isn't going to be leaking out of it. That's it, like that. And then make sure that we have our number face facing downwards. And then again, I'm just going to place that in there. Make sure that it still fits. Perfect, like that. You don't want it coming out the back end, but we do want to be able to pour our extra resin into that reservoir. So that is another one done. And I'm going to show you one more on this is the Jumbo D20. So again, that's the hole that we're trying to measure. We're going to take our 5 mil pipette, though I mean, I guess you could use any size since we're just chopping away at it anyway. I'm going to cut just the top off, because this is the only part that we need. Then I'm going to trim at the top a little bit, and then we're going to see, I've done enough of these that I'm hoping that I'm a pretty decent judge. There we go. Yeah. Right? So making sure that it's not coming out the back end. We just want it to very, very firmly sit in there. That's all we want. Okay. Then once we have our correct measurement, then I'm going to just take my scissors and cut down the length of it. That's the part that's going to make it reusable. And then, sorry, my throat's killing me. We're going to just put a little bit of tape around it. Again, this doesn't have to be done perfectly. We're not going to be filling up the top. It doesn't matter if there's tape hanging off the top, that's fine. It's not going to make a difference at all. And we're going to just set that back into the hole like that. Again, making sure that it's not popping out the back. Now I have done this for all 7 of my molds here, you can see. This is all just spills from the practice set that I did. I am going to warn you that this is messy. This is a messier set to use. The way these molds are constructed, there is a lot of kind of oozing out. So be prepared for that. Be ready for this to be slightly messier than using like a cut mold, like the normal style of mold that I use. But this is what a lot of people have picked up. They're reasonably priced. They're a really good starting point if you are just kind of getting into dice making. So we're gonna work with this, and we're gonna do the best that we can to not mess everything. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, off to the side, pour my resin, and then I will be back to show you how I put it all into the molds. Okay, so here we are down to the last 2. I've done the other ones and put them off to the side because, I mean, you really don't want to watch me do this 8 times. But I will be showing you the large D20, and I am going to be showing you the D6 so that you can see the process. But it's basically the same thing for all the dice. Just make sure that you have your matched pipette to the correct dice because they all have different size holes. So make sure that you're not getting those confused. I have mixed up my resin for the ease of, and I have no self-control. I have done a like a light kind of greeny using, this is the Ranger alcohol ink in pistachio. And again, because I have no self-control, I've used these 2 solar color dusts, Luminous and Gossamer. One is like a glitter and one is like a powder, so I've combined those 2. If you are wondering what is in there, that's what it is. Okay, so let's get going. All right, so last 2. So you're going to have your lid, you're going to have your mold, and you're going to have your pre-taped pipette. I'm going to remove the pipette because I'm going to fill this mostly to the top. Then I'm going to put the lid on, top it up, and then put the pipette in, and then fill up the pipette reservoir. Okay, that's a lot of words, right? I'm going to try not to bump the camera or spill all over the place. Okay. I pour this way, especially if you did have any sort of inclusions. You want to make sure that you are not getting, well, as many bubbles as possible. I use a pressure pot, but if you don't, this is a nice way to kind of see that you're not getting any bubbles in there. Or if you want to do a multiple color pour, this is definitely a way to do it. Sorry, it's a big T20. But this is also a way where if you did have bubbles raising to the top and you weren't using a pressure pot, you could always use like your standard lighter or something to pop the bubbles on top to reduce the amount of bubbles as much as possible. But I mean, I use a pressure pot if you're using a pressure pot, and that's not really something that you have to be worried about because that does all the hard work for you. So I can just mix and squeeze and not worry about bubbles at all. Okay, but we're gonna try and fill this up. Not quite to the top, because then we're gonna top it up afterwards. So let's see. We wanna get it really close, but not quite. All right, that looks pretty good. Then what I'm going to do, and again, this is where things get a little bit messy. If you found a way around the mess, by all means, let me know, but I'm solving one problem at a time. One problem at a time. Again, making sure that your number face is down. These are really nice, and they do come with like a little key slot, so you can tell where the little nub should go and on which side. So all we're going to do is we're just going to slide this in, just pulling gently at the corners until you have it all popped in nice and neatly like that, making sure that it's sitting nice and flush down. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pouring pipette, I'm going to put it into the hole, and I'm going to just finish topping it up. This is also another nice way to eliminate bubbles, is by just doing the top up there. Now if you weren't using a pressure pot at this point, you could definitely give your mold a little bit of a squeeze, a little bit of a turn. Thankfully they're still pretty nice and clear. I'm not sure how these are going to wear, but see if any more bubbles come out. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our reservoir pipette tape thing. I have to come up for a name for these because I don't want to keep calling them that. That's embarrassing. And we are going to lightly push that back in. Now remember, these should be sized so that they are not pushing into the dice. We don't want to jam them in there. That's not the point of this. We just want to have a reservoir for the extra resin for when our resin shrinks, when it's curing. And then here is the part where you should probably have steadier hands than I do, is I'm going to just drizzle in and fill that up. Oh gosh, look how shaky my hands are. That's horrible. Okay, like that. And that's it. It's done and it's ready to go. Just making sure that that's sitting nicely in there. Again, we're just going to be putting these into the pressure pot and letting them sit there. They're not going to be bashed around, so you don't have to worry about that. But that's it. It's ready to go. So one more time with the D6. So I'm going to take my pipette out. I'm going to take my lid off. I am going to pour into the mold almost all the way to the top. Not quite all the way, but almost like that. We're trying to minimize mess. As you can see, I'm not so great at that, but maybe you're better. Okay, so we're going to now put our lid on. This is the part that can often get messy. Again, if you're not using a pressure pot, now's a good time to get a lighter, like a barbecue lighter, bust some of those bubbles at the top. You know, take your time. We're just, you know, trying to get as perfect as possible if you're not using a pressure pot. And then we're going to slide our cap on, gently pulling at the corners of the mold until it's all set in nicely, like that, making sure that our keys lined up, making sure that it's nice and flush with the face. I'm going to take my pipette into the hole and I'm going to squeeze and I'm going to get out, see, now this is where things are a little messy. I'm going to make sure that I give a little squeeze. See, sometimes little bubbles come out. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to wipe with my finger. I have a paper towel on my lap just to get that off because we don't need all that extra resin around the mold. And I'm just going to take my taped pipette reservoir again, and I'm just going to lightly press that in there, remembering that we don't want it to go all the way down and sit into the dice, okay? And then I'm going to gently drizzle my resin into the reservoir and fill it up. Now, if you do happen to see that you have a bubble in your pipette like I do there, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, you can squeeze your die and you'll see, oh, not that hard. Uh-oh. Again, messy, right? That's okay. You can squeeze your die and those bubbles will start to raise up, but they will raise on their own. So you don't honestly really have to overly worry about that. But you want to make sure that that's in there securely. I should have measured that. I think I measured it properly, but we shall see. My last D6 came up pretty good, so I think that this one will be okay too. So these I'm going to pop into the pressure pot, and then I will take them out in 24 hours and then show you what they look like then. So I will see you in 24 hours. Goodbye. Okay, so here we are 24 hours later, and you can see that we are at a soft cure. And also that I cut myself, but let's pretend that we don't see that. And all we're going to do is peel off our molds. Okay, put that off to the side. Now what I do is I kind of just pull up here on the edges to kind of lift, because I want to get access to where the sprue is meeting the face of the die, is really what I want to do. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lift the flap of my mold up here, because we're trying to get this as flush to the face of the die as possible. The reason behind this being is that it'll be less sanding later. So I'm just going to try and lift around it. Okay, try and peel off any excess. Again, this is only at a soft cure. You can't, this isn't going to work nearly as well if you leave them for the full 72 hours. And I'm just going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to slide it between the two, and I'm just going to kind of wiggle and press, nothing too hard. And you can see I have a cutting mat underneath, and my fingers are not in the way. So if you're worried about me cutting myself, sorry, I have to get a different angle. And then all I do is I'm going to press off, and that's what's left. So our cap is still in perfect condition. There's our reservoir that has come off. Here is our die, and again, there is a little bit of a bump there, but once we sand that down, this is going to be a perfectly clean face. I'm going to trim off the excess with my clippers. If you would, I mean, like to see that, but I mean, that's nothing, you know, really special. And again, this is just kind of the process of removing some of the bits before we actually get into the sanding. These are going to need to cure for another 2 days, and then we'll really get into the detail work. So, but while they're nice and soft, it's easy to kind of clip these off, or you can always use an X-Acto knife to scrape them off. But again, this is just kind of the beginning. And then here is what's left over on our makeshift reservoir and sprue. Now the really cool thing here is that because the pipettes are plastic, all we basically have to do is just peel the tape off. I mean, because if you think of, I know pipettes aren't exceptionally expensive, but this is already a really pricey hobby. So if we can reduce, I mean, waste and cost, I mean, might as well, right? So all I'm going to do is just peel the piece of tape off, and because we cut it down the side, literally we can just open it up, and then that all comes out. And then this is perfectly sized to our D20. So what I do is I'm going to keep the cap and the pipette and the mold all together, and I just kind of usually just pop this in. Sorry if you can hear my kids' TV show in the background. And then I keep them all together like that so that I don't lose them. There we go. I will show you one more time. So here is our D12. Yes, yes. Okay. Sorry, my camera's really low. My bungee is awful, so I keep bumping it. Okay, so I'm going to peel it out of the bottom mold. I'm going to kind of, I like to just kind of, oh, I'm so sorry I keep hitting the camera. My phone's really heavy. And I'm going to kind of just wiggle up and detach. I'm not going to pull at it because I don't want to remove anything from the face of the die. So I'm just going to wiggle in. You can see right there. So I'm going to wiggle my X-Acto knife in down the side, gently and straight. Hopefully you can see this. It's hard because you need a little bit of an angle to get some pressure and also not to cut yourself. So I'm just doing a gentle wiggle back and forth. I hope you can see that. And then I'm going to turn. Okay, and then, I'm so sorry. My camera's way too close. Okay, so Sorry, you're gonna have to just trust me on this one. I'm just turning it and I'm just pushing down like that. Sorry. And then it cuts down and you will see that there is a little bump, but again, we're gonna sand that down so this will be a completely flat and perfect face. Once we start sanding, I'm going to remove the excess with my clippers. Again, this is just the rough work. This is not the finished product. And then on our lid, the lid gets easily removed, making sure that we're picking off any silicone or sorry, any resin if there's anything stuck on there. And then all we do is pick off the excess resin that's stuck on here. We find where our tape has overlapped. I mean, you can use something kind of easier to come off, like washi tape would be slightly less sticky than this, but this is what I have. So, and then again, because they've been cut, all the resin in the reservoir comes right back out. And I mean, you can reuse these pieces of resin too. Like now is a good time because it's a soft cure. You can chop them up, put them in dice. It kind of gives like a stained glass effect. And our pipette is free to be used again. All right, I hope that helps somebody. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys soon. Okay, goodbye.